Good evening, everybody. I have the privilege of, I guess, talking first because I'm one of the pastors, along with Pastor Chris Miller, in the Bright Red Tee. Um, we're the two pastors at Caw Prairie Community Church in Lenexa, Kansas, outside of Kansas City, where Walter Hill, for a certain amount of deployed time in his career, was a member at our church, and so we're Walter and I have always stayed in touch, been grateful for one another's friendship. And in a season like we have since the Memorial Day weekend events with George Floyd and just the thing that the Holy Spirit is doing all across the country to change hearts and to open eyes and things like that. Walter and I have been trying to vision together for how those of us who have experiences to share could do it, and how those of us who don't have very many experiences hearing those experiences would have a chance to hear them. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Walter, my distinguished colleague and friend. And Walter has worked with Valerie Reinke and Caw Prairie, a friend of ours, Lauren Clark, and those guys are going to be our content leaders for the night. So Walter, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Thanks for a great introduction and how we reconnected and everything all over these years. Yeah, today we're just to follow up a little bit, and I always say this before every meeting, is we try to create this opportunity for everyone to have a voice, but to be able to speak, but also feel comfortable enough that there's no judgment here. And we all love each other, probably not personally, but we love each other and people, just really trying to here to learn. So I kind of wrote something up like that. You know, we all have people that have fire and passion on this call, but we also have people that really want to learn and understand before we react and respond, and actually get the truth from truthful experiences. And I think that's what I find a lot, is learning from everyone's experiences or their thoughts. So it's all great positive stuff here. So with that in mind, and I just wanted to bring up one thing. I know some of you weren't on the call last week, and we did a little survey on the movie 13. And we took that survey, we asked people if they've seen the movie, and there were some people that had not seen it. And the follow-up homework of that was to ask people after they've seen it, do they have any feedback or anything they think they saw that they like to share? So, and I know there's a couple of people that actually sent me messages personally that I asked to watch it, and they personally sent me text messages about what they felt and what they saw. I don't see them on this call right now as of yet. I know they're going to be on this call, so that's okay. But if anybody else can share anything that they might have seen some of that movie since we met last. Then I would assume everyone on here saw it before we met on the last.
I didn't get a chance to see it.
Oh, okay. Okay, Fred. Has anyone else watched it since then?
All right, Travis and Sarah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Walter and I were thinking of, and this is scheduled for the end, but this will give your friends a chance to show up here, was that we are meeting for Race and Grace first and third Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central. And that means this is a third Thursday, so the next first one won't be till early August. And we were contemplating, if there was interest, we could have our Zoom meeting on July 30th. So 2 weeks from tonight, a fifth Thursday, we could stream the movie 13, the documentary, and then be able to chat and maybe break out into breakout rooms afterwards. So know that that's something we're talking about. We're open to topics, of course, of all sorts. But just to know there was enough interest, and if you're like me and you saw the movie, there was a lot to take in. I'd be happy to see it again.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in, and they think that's good, we kind of wanted to do a poll, but I think that poll is set up for the last poll. I looked at it. It's a question from last time. It's the question, and I'm not really familiar with it to be able to jump a question out there, but someone could easily over in the chat just say, yeah, they like to do that. or they're opening from that. We're just trying to create whatever someone would like to hear and to be like. So
Now, I like that idea because after I saw it, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it with someone and either validate my thoughts or feelings or like open my questions up. So I welcome that opportunity to be able to watch it together and just have a good conversation afterward, because sometimes it's just nice to just talk about it.
mhm. Anyone else think that's a good idea?
I'd definitely be up for that.
Okay.
Walter, what was the movie?
13?
13? Huh. Okay.
So it's spelled fully. It's the 13th Amendment is
Right.
what the movie is. It's on Netflix.
Thank you.
Wait, and
I
watch
just looked up
it on
13 and it was like,
July 30th.
that didn't seem right. Okay.
Yeah, it's if you don't have Netflix, it's also free on YouTube right now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
We can all just say if we want to do that at the end or whatever, just let us know. Everybody can think about that. Sounds like it could be a really good opportunity to have this right after, because there's a lot of things going on. I know when I saw the movie, there's a lot of breaks and it's just a lot to talk about. So it's a lot of content over a long period of time. So it might be a great opportunity to do that.
Sure,
So-
I'd like to get, if I can get it on YouTube, that's good.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Anybody else? Have anything to say about that?
You know, I'm hearing a critical mass. If there's 4 people willing to show up, chances are there's probably, 12 to 18. So let's just go ahead with it, and I'll put the details here in the message board.
Okay.
And if anybody needs that YouTube link, I just dropped it into the chat.
Awesome.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so I'll get back to the schedule and agenda. We have 2 great presenters today, this evening, and one is Lauren Clark, and he's on later. He'll be talking about the first subject, and I think I sent that out with the invite. Everyone knows about the micro and the macro aggressions. And then Valerie and Melanie Harris will be talking about the second. That's, I think it's on here. I'm trying to read it here. But they're talking about
By all
Black
lives
Lives Matter, all lives matter, Black Lives Matter. Yeah. Thanks, Val. Okay. So they'll be doing that, and Lauren's going to start out first and start his presentation and talk a little bit about the subject and really share some of the things that he researched and everything. So with that in mind, we just need to share Lauren's PowerPoint, and we'll get started that way. Any other questions? And I think we're going to put some of the sightings and information from the research. It'll be in the chat. So if anybody needs to click on anything and get additional information, they could possibly do that. Okay. Okay, so I think Lauren needs to share his screen.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Give me it. I hope everybody can see that.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So just a little bit about me, just so you kind of know where I think Walter talked to me about doing this, and I took it from the perspective of I'm a high school educator, and so I see this a lot with parents or teachers or even administrators in my own district. So when I started doing research and finding definitions for this, there was one site that I used more than another, and it just kind of put everything into basic language. which to me helps people understand this. And so when we get to the questions later, hopefully that then you can think about some experiences in your own life or in your own workplace, or in a neighborhood, or in our church, where you kind of see some of these things. So the basic definition of macroaggression is just any type of verbal or nonverbal or slightness or snub towards somebody. The big thing is that it's not always intentional. Sometimes it is, but it's not always. And when we get to some of the examples, you've probably heard somebody say some of these things before. But the biggest thing is it's based towards a marginalized group, whether it be a female or somebody who's Hispanic, or somebody who's African American, or somebody who may be gay or lesbian. I mean, it's just one of those things where you're saying it in their perception of the situation. You don't necessarily mean to. Some people do, but they're taking it in that context. So I have, okay. And then another part of this, and it kind of goes with what I just talked about, which is, this idea of microaggression, whether you're targeting gender, disability, and to me, this definition, like at some point in time, everybody has seen this, where you are doing something and it may not be perceived as an insult to you, but it's an insult to them. And so whether it be, and the video I'll show you, we'll get to some questions here in a second, but, it really made me think about how I say things to people and how my words could potentially offend somebody if, I'm not culturally sensitive to the person, or I'm not sensitive to, who they are. A big thing in high school is pronouns. We have a lot of transgender students, and, whether you call somebody he or she is like super, super big to them. And some students are willing to say that to you. It's just like, some people prefer to be called Black or African American, or people of Latino descent. Some people like to be called by their nation of origin. Some people like to be called Latin American. So it's really about being conscious of what that person or that individual, and it may be different for every individual that that falls in that category. But how do they perceive what you're saying to them, or how do they perceive what you're doing to them? And so we all have these little microaggressions, or even at times we may all be discriminated by some of these micro aggressions, whether it be by age or nationality or location. So hopefully this video will play. If not, I will figure something out.
Dan, if you're sharing this, you need to share when you share the screen, you need to turn on the fact that it sees your system audio, so it hears your system audio.
Okay, so I got to turn my audio up then.
Are you sharing, Lauren, or is
yeah?
Okay.
I'm sharing.
Unshare and share again, and choose system audio.
Okay.
Lauren, if you need me to, I've got the video queued up too.
Okay, let's see if it works now. I turned my audio up.
No, it's a setting where you have to share your audio, and it's part of your share screen. There's a button at the bottom that says share screen, or actually unshare, and then share screen, and choose your include your system audio. It's part, I think, of the advanced sharing options.
Same as system. Is that what it is?
Yeah, system sounds or system.
Under speaker, I'm not seeing under system sounds.
No, it's I think it is in the advanced. Let's see. It's part of your share opportunity where you can share your system. I can run it from mine if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that because I do not know that setting. So here we go. There we go.
So
I'll give it to you.
everybody, yeah, let me move my thing over here. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
You didn't click the share computer sign.
Okay, there we go.
Hi, Joe. Sorry I'm late for the call. I had a perfect morning, had to catch the last set.
You, sir?
Yeah, I'm at Ocean Beach pretty much all the time. You?
Totally. We'll have to go when I'm up there next week.
Hey, I'm stoked. Epic. Are you John? Joe? Oh, yeah. Great to meet you. I totally had your picture different in my head. Oh, really? Yeah, but anyways, can I get you a cup of coffee? Yeah, sure.
My hair looks crazy. It looks like a mess.
I don't believe you. Your hair always looks awesome. I mean, how do you do it? Do you twist it? Do you do it yourself?
Yeah, I twisted it myself.
Oh. I mean, do you mind? Oh.
Yeah, actually, I do mind.
Oh. Sorry.
But I mean, if you're really curious about it, there are like tons of YouTube videos out now about natural hair, so maybe check that out.
There's no way we were gonna make it to that date.
No. I have no idea what they were thinking. What are you doing this weekend?
Going to the beach with some buddies.
I mean, it sounds great. You've already got quite the tan. Where's your family from?
Here.
Yeah, before here, where are they from?
Still here.
But before that?
A few generations from here.
Oh, sorry.
So that video kind of sums up 3 different microaggressions that people see. So when you apply for a job, based off of your name, what do they assume your ethnicity is? Or when you talk to somebody on the phone, and that that's an example. I mean that is a microaggression, even though that was 2 Caucasian people talking to each other. I mean, it was age discrimination. And even though, it didn't mean to come off that way, but, I didn't think that's what you were going to look like. Or, can I touch your hair? I get that a lot, especially because I have longer hair and it's curly and people want to touch it. And then the last one is one that's probably more prominent. Where are you from? Like, you're a little bit darker than me, or your complexion's a little bit darker. You get a better tan than I do. So, you must be from a different country than America. And so we have all of these different microaggressions where in society, we have this bias based off of what we think people should be. So a couple of questions that I know that Walter wanted to pose. The first one was kind of, what type of microaggressions do you notice in your own community?
And Lauren, this is Walt. The first video reminded me of an experience I had, and I just wanted to share it with you because I think it went both ways. But when I was working for Microsoft, I had to go to Jamaica, and I had to talk to a client. And I talked to him for weeks on the phone. So he's talking like Yaman and all that. So I had to fly there, and I flew there, and I had to wait in this area for him. And there was a lot of people, and I was looking for him, and I could not find him. And he couldn't find me. And it was funny when we finally found each other because they called their name. He was standing right next to me because I thought he would look like a Jamaican, like the long braids. He was a white guy. And he thought I would look like a white guy, not a black guy. So we didn't know each other was standing next to each other. We just totally stereotyped because of our voices and the way we talk. So it just reminds me of that, like the guy said. I assumed he would look like a Jamaican guy that I see all the time on television, but he didn't. So I just wanted to share that. I thought it was pretty relatable what happened with the guy. Does anyone else have any experiences in their community?
So I have one, and Melanie's on the phone. So I had said to her, wow, you have beautiful hair. And Melanie, you should show yourself. I said, you have beautiful hair. You got really good hair. And she basically said, don't say it's good hair, because everyone's hair is equal. And I got blessed with being able to have great curls, and it works very nicely naturally. But my interpretation was very much of an insult or an implied, you're better than others. And it was just something that I had not realized until I was a little bit educated about what I perceive versus what someone else perceives, or what's happened culturally, or from having ethnic hair. So that was one of my learning moments of, I don't think I'm ever going to forget that. So it's beautiful hair.
Yeah.
I have a couple. One example I have is when I speak to people on the telephone, and if I'm interviewing for a job or if they're interviewing for a job and they come in and see me, they expect to see a Caucasian person as opposed to a black person, kind of what Walt touched on. And vice versa, when I interview for a job on the telephone, they say, well, when you come in, and then when I go in for an interview, but yet they see me sitting there looking for a different person of color. The second one is, especially in my job, you hear a lot of guys speak about this too many chiefs, not enough Indians. And just the way they use that language where Native Americans, as far as everybody wants to be a chief, not an Indian, which it should be, everybody can't be the boss, basically.
Anybody else wants to share anything?
I've noticed in this area, there's often just an assumption about economic status based on skin color. And as I did nonprofit work, I saw that a lot, where somebody was African American, it was assumed, oh, they must be harder off than the Caucasian people around here. And yeah, just saw that way more than I should have.
One way that I see this in schools every single day is, you're pretty smart for a black kid, or you're Asian. Why are you not getting A's on your math test? And so we kind of have these pre-diagnostic, scenarios of what this person or kid should be. Another example, and when we get to microaggressions, is some of the policies and some of the agendas that we have, building a wall. Well, what are we building a wall for? Like, what is the purpose of that? And, how do our words and our actions influence the behavior of others? And so when we talk about microaggressions and if they're good or if they're bad, why would you say they're not so micro? Why would these types of biases or these types of comments not be healthy for relationships with others?
I feel like sometimes you're working out of a hole. I've experienced some things where people assume that I should be older than I was. I have a young face too, so that doesn't help. Used to. I'm looking older now, according to my wife. but you feel like you're automatically working. You have to prove yourself right out of the gate. Where if I looked older in certain circumstances, there would be an assumed, wisdom or something like that. And I can't relate with, the race factor per se. But I definitely have felt those experiences of like, I got to prove myself before I can state my case or do something, to lead in a certain way. I have to prove that I'm worthy of their respect first, where there's a lot of cases where you don't need to do that. So I think you waste time and energy and trying to establish yourself unnecessarily.
I think that's a great example.
And I'll join in with Valerie in saying that I've, being a talker, like as a preacher vocationally, that's kind of one of the strengths and weaknesses, and oftentimes that means in my eagerness to start conversations with people. I mean, I'm sure I've been inappropriate and made those microaggressive slights unknowingly, but I, especially vis-a-vis language, I'm interested in language. I have a decent ear for accents, and so there's been a good number of times when I've asked people kind of the question that the woman did to the slightly darker skinned guy in the cafeteria, like, "Hey, this is awesome. I appreciate the tabbouleh or whatever. What country are you guys from?" And I hadn't until lately hadn't realized, that might seem aggressive and unwelcoming and othering and all that. My intention is just to, I know like 3 things about a lot of countries, at least I could start a conversation. So, I've been cautioned that sometimes what I look at as exuberant, friendliness could be off-putting and hurtful. Yeah, you don't know another person's story, and I might need to assume a more cautious posture.
And it's interesting because when we talk about this, whether we have been the person to commit the offense or we feel the offense, if we don't have a strong enough relationship with the person we're talking to, it goes unspoken. So the correction doesn't actually occur because we're uncomfortable talking about correcting somebody that might be personally offensive when someone just said it in front of us. So that one person basically says, I do mind if you touch my hair. Here's resources you can go to. But that's not something that happens frequently enough to help somebody realize that you might have offended someone. And so there's a certain level of courage to be able to go, I don't know if you understand this, but what you just said actually offends me. And so most times realize that it just becomes awkward. It could potentially degrade the relationship, or people personally have to compromise their level of integrity or their level of care to be able to continue forward with the relationship if they're unwilling to talk about it. So back to that question of what happens if when we do this, relationships can degrade, or we live in the awkwardness, and sometimes we continue to move forward in ignorance, where we offend someone else as well. So what is that? Love your fellow man enough to tell them you're messing up.
So we had an experience with our youngest, who is adopted and is African American. And I don't know, to me, this is more of a macroaggression, but we were actually in a store and he was ahead of me in line. It's a small store, kind of a single clerk. And the cashier looked at him and said, "Are you one of those kids that we kicked out of the store yesterday?" And I looked at her and I said, "I'm sorry, was he in the store yesterday?" And she's like, "Well, I wasn't here, but there were some black kids they had to kick out of the store yesterday." And I said, "Well, I'm his mom, and I know he wasn't in the store yesterday." Wow. And I don't want to admit this, but I was so mad that I looked at my son and I said, "I'm sorry, there are some white people that all black people look the same too." Because I was so mad, which was just as bad. It was just as bad as what she did, but I was just like, ugh. But the one thing I noticed is the minute I said, I'm his mom, she changed. And I thought, this is the world my kid has to go live in. You know, he's going to be accused. Granted, part of it was because he's a kid and part of it was because he's Black. And I know that. And it's like, it's so eye-opening. And I was so, and look, I'm like flushing. I get angry every time I think about it. I need to work on my forgiveness, Dan.
It's a process.
Well, if you look at some of the themes on the left-hand side, you know, one of those, the criminality one, the perception of color, and the linking of the same individuals based off of color is a huge disparity. And that's some of the things that 13 talks to, the movie 13 that some people have seen, is that we have this stereotype of certain individuals in our country, and based off that stereotype, we deem them a threat. And that all of them are criminals, and that all of them are problems to society. You know, another example is when we say illegal, you know, and this really offends me because in my mind, we're all illegal. Like, none of us came to this country legally. There's only one origin of individual that's in this country legally. So when we say that somebody is illegal, aren't we all? I mean, I don't, conceptually, I never understand that. And so, you know, when we throw out these words or these themes to people, and it ignites fires that creates more division than it does peace, you know, all of those are microaggressions. And the macro runs increase to, you know, having the prison, the pipeline situation, you know, having Jim Crow laws. I mean, so it's a systemic issue, but I mean, it starts with our words and our choices of words and how we perceive individuals. An example for me, and mine is very similar to Walter. You know, my name is Lauren, so you know, you don't think of me as an African American male, but then when people meet me, they always take a step back, and you know, I can kind of tell, and I've experienced it enough that I know that you know, a big Black guy with dreads is not what they expected when they thought Lauren. That was not their assumption. And so, yes, they've had conversations with me. Yes, I've had dialogues back and forth with them. But these pre-diagnosed assumptions of what people are based off of their color of skin and then how they look is something as a society that we have to constantly start thinking about. And again, there's a list of things, and you can read through some of these things, and I'm sure Walter will share this. But for me, this just kind of hits home the point of, you know, the themes that we have in society, you know, whether it be color blindness, whether it be disparity in social economic status. I mean, it all has to do with our word choice and what we say and how we say it to people. You know, our actions also speak louder than our words, you know, and there's always that saying, you know, if you say nothing, I mean, you're just as culpable. I mean, if you see something wrong and you say nothing, you are also a part of the situation that's creating the problem. Let's see if I go to the next one.
Lauren, I like the page you had, though, and some of the things on there I relate with some of those questions. I just looked at them, and I just think probably a lot of us go through some of these statements on here. So it's kind of funny. I never seen them all together on a page, but I thought they're kind of funny because I think about those.
What I notice about that is the things that, not exactly those words, but it worries me that I've done that before unintentionally. And so I appreciate when people call me out. Not long ago, probably a couple of years ago, I went into one of my stores and there was a girl there that I knew, and she had changed her hair color, and it was, you know, it just looked really cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love your hair. How did you do that? And honestly, I would do that to white women too, right? Because I'm kind of like Dan, I talk too much, and I'm always trying to find ways to chat with people. And there were two girls there, and they looked at each other and kind of smiled. And I was like, what? And they were like, that's what white people always say to me. White people always want to hear about Black people's hair. And I was so shocked at that point. And I was, you know, like thinking, how many times have I done that and not known that that would be, you know, hurtful to someone? So I think a lot of times totally is not intentional. But based off that person's background, it is. So I appreciated more than anything them telling me, you know, that that was wrong. And I think because they knew me, they felt like they probably could. But I want to know that stuff because I don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I think that part of this, again, is just education, doing stuff like this so that we don't, so that we're not hurtful, that we're not saying things that, you know, that we just even, you know, aren't even thinking about because it's just kind of the culture that we've been raised in.
Can I just say that, Shannon, you said that you'd say that to anyone because you thought it looked good. I have this right now where I talk to everybody. I think I try to find things about people to compliment, or I'm just interested in people. And now I find myself stopping up short a little bit because I don't want to sound, or I don't want to come across as that they might think I'm disingenuous, that it's not that's not like I'm going out of my way when this is actually who I am. And I engage everyone in conversation. As far as the issue with hair, just a few weeks ago, I did that. And I asked a gentleman, I said, can you help me out here? It's like, I really don't know. So perhaps you can educate me on this. But this is what happened. I saw somebody had this great hair. I wanted to compliment them on it. And I said, I didn't know how to refer to their hair. And so I described it and he told me what to call it, twists. And I said, oh, okay, that was easy enough. And I said, is that offensive? And he says, no. He says, mine you would call dreadlocks because it's longer. So I appreciated that interaction. I certainly didn't mean it as offensive. It was just educating me because I did not know. And I did say that. I did say I'm coming from a place of ignorance on this. So if you can enlighten me, that would be great. But I'm a little concerned these days about coming across as, I guess, disingenuous. So, how do you handle that?
Linda, I would say what you did was the right thing to do. When you have a lack of understanding, can you educate me on this? I mean, and again, me as a teacher, I look at it this way. Like there are things that I don't know. And if I don't go ask people that I know can educate me on it, then I won't be educated on it. And then I will still have the same bias or the still misunderstanding. And so, but I think it's just asking that question in that way. I don't want to seem like, I'm, but I don't know. So can you educate me on that? I mean, I think that's a perfectly good way to ask anybody a question, regardless of what question you're asking.
Well, thank you. Because I did follow up by saying, I'm a little jealous because look at my hair. How straight and just straight, nothing, And anyway, we had a good laugh over it.
I think that's part of the danger of some of this too, is that we're getting to a point where I think we're so afraid of offending somebody that the best thing is just not to say anything. And I don't, that's not who I am. I'm going to make that compliment to somebody. I'm going to take that risk. Even if it comes back and I've got egg on my face, I'm going to take that risk to let that person know, because I'm not going to say it unless I genuinely feel, I love the way your hair looks. I love the fact that you colored it pink. In fact, we've got a local girl that had done that with her hair, and I complimented on it and said, it brightens up the day as I see your hair. We've got to be able to take that risk versus being afraid to always offend. If that's not our place of position, doesn't mean we can't learn something from it, but it also means that we've got to, be true to ourselves and what our original intent is, and perhaps learn from it. But we can't. I don't want to see a time where we all back away from saying anything because we're afraid we're going to be offensive. Lauren, you're talking about all the pronouns at the school, and I'm like, well, I haven't really had to deal with that too much in my line of work in my office. But at the same time, I'm like, how do you keep all those hundreds of kids straight and addressing each one of them with the proper pronoun? It's like, where do you say, here's the line, you know? Because if you've either got a great memory, a picture memory, and can record all this for each person what they prefer to be called, you know, how do you draw the line?
And I would say, how do I know that? Because I built relationships with all those kids. It's just like, how do I know what sport they play? Or how do I know what instrument they play in the band? Or, you know, how do I know what's one of their favorite movies or artists?
Yep.
I mean, it's the same thing. And that's where microaggressions go back to. And this is, and I 100% agree with you, but it goes back to having the conversation with the person in the first place. And yes, there are going to be times where you're going to have that person that says, like, no, I don't like the way this is going. But I think it's human nature to want to build relationships with people. And when we make that, instead of saying all this or that, that's where we start to see the difference. Because and I can tell you this, not all the kids that are transgender care. So I don't have to do it for every single one. But for the one that does care, or that kid that really does care, that I say, hey, man, I know you did a really good job at your baseball game. Like, I have to make that effort to make sure that I have a relationship with that person, where if it was a more complicated conversation, we could probably have it. Like, hey, like.
I was going to say, this topic feels so old because when I talk to my kids who are all teens, the idea of diversity and pronoun, it is like no big shakes to them. They're like, it's cool, it's fine. And I think, and don't we have a young man on the phone? I mean, I would love to hear why we struggle so when, like, my kids are just like totally nonplussed by it.
Lauren, I really like the way you kind of covered how you keep it straight. I think one of the big things as I listen to you guys that continues to be important to me is, number one, it's important to continue to cultivate those relationships and don't be afraid to speak out, or we don't want to be so sensitive or even desensitized that we don't want to continue to make those connections, because we all thrive on being connected. And at the same time, part of being connected means that we lean in and engage and build those relationships. And so there are going to be times when we step on toes and it will not be intentional. And if we're lucky, someone will tell us. And the one thing I would offer for all of us to take away, I read a book years ago called Thanks for the Feedback. And throughout our careers, like wherever we are, we're always taught how to give feedback to other people and never quite how to receive it. And that book really focuses on how to receive it. And the one thing I took away from that book is we measure ourselves based on our intent. We measure everyone else based on their impact. That is, if I step on your toe and hurt you and you say, ouch, I say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toe. Not, I'm sorry I hurt you, right? Starting at impact. So I would just caution us to remember that when we find out that we've crossed those lines, put ourselves on the front line in the position of impact and work from there. And if we focus on our impact and not our intent, then I think our genuine nature comes across and we continue to move these relationships forward.
And I'm going to add to that, life is about experience, which means we're going to fail. So I am a model citizen of grace, right? I get grace every day, and I make small infractions all the time when I talk. But what I do is I remember, so that the next time I'm having a conversation with someone, there are things I avoid. I mean, we all had to learn the hard way where you don't tell your friend what she's wearing doesn't make her look fat, right? We all had to learn these things. So it's just about communication. And when you're told something, remember how someone told you it felt, and just don't do that again. Find alternate words. It's okay to say, your hair looks fantastic, right? It's okay to say that. How'd you make that happen with all that hair? That's a different wording, but it's okay to compliment people, right?
And don't touch me.
Yeah. But that
Yeah, and I was going to say, especially, I've been a youth pastor up until recently, and, working with youth and especially the pronoun thing, making an effort goes a long way with the youth. You might not get it right every time. I had a student who transitioned, and so I had known them for 3 years under one set of pronouns, and then, the last year and a half under another set of pronouns. And, I had to tell him, I'm going to slip up. I'm going to mess up, but I'm trying. It's not because I don't want to. It's just because I'm still getting in this myself. And that conversation went so far that even when I messed up in the future, I had their respect. And so I think just that earnest effort, especially with our youth, is what can go such a long way.
I have a comment on that. I think communication is everything. And hi, I'm a little bit late, but I'm so honored to be here. I have an example that I was in Walmart and there's a woman in the middle of the store and it looked like she was in very much danger, but I had been yelled at before for trying to help someone who's handicapped. And so I walked up and I said, I don't want to offend you, but can I help you? And she said, oh, you don't offend me. It's okay. So I think a matter of communication, everyone has said it before, communicating that is so important. And then also not tolerating it. In my home, there was a man from Texas and his wife and his kid, and he said a word that offended me, an N-word, and I said, that is not allowed in my house. You can never say that in my house, and that's how I've always been. And if we have we communicate, manage expectations of people, and let them know where our heart is, then I think we're going to be better. So thanks for letting me say something.
I had an issue. Well, I had latter part of last month. I had a cousin that brought her boyfriend, her fiance, down from California. First time meeting him, and he was a fair skinned with freckles, had real good hair. I mean, the hair down his back, and so after we had talked for a while, and so I asked him, so what are you mixed with? Because he was telling me that his last name, it was sounded kind of funny. I said, so what is that? Is that Indian? Or he said, no. He said, it's all black. He said, I'm just a black person, I'm a black man. I don't have any mixture in me. He said, and that's the problem that I have when I tell people my last name. They all want to know, what am I mixed with? I'm not mixed with anything. He said, so there you go with that. I said, no, I'll just, that's a concern. I was just asking because you look the part, but just because you look the part, I mean, you are the part. So, so I apologize for him, to him for doing that. I just thought he was mixed with something, but he's all black. So it was just something I had to learn,
And I go back to all of these examples, go back to kind of what Melanie said, which is, nobody's intent was to harm, which a microaggression can be intentional or unintentional, but it's the communication after the fact of, that was not my intent. I'm sorry. I think that key component of, expressing, that your intent was not to demean or degrade the person. I think more of it happens in society as unintentional, but there's never that apology. Again, because my time is going to run out here, but some more examples is, if you're in a store with somebody and you say, "Can you afford that?" I mean, that's a social economical microaggression, or you're kind of old to be doing that, or another example would be, are you sure that you can do that? The example that the lady before Fred, I didn't catch her name because I was looking at my piece of paper. But a lot of people with disabilities don't like to get help. So it really doesn't matter who it's intended for. A lot of it is, how do they perceive it, and how do we intend to make it? and that builds to the larger picture, which would be macroaggressions. And so kind of the last thing for me tonight, a macroaggression is just the policies that we put in place, from the movie 13, from, moving some of our laws where we started to target African-American people from slavery to now the prison pipeline. Some of our policies that go with in the, I can't remember, I think it was the 1990s, the crime bill, where crack and cocaine are the same drug, but we penalize people more if they were put in jail for crack than if they were put in jail for cocaine. Even today, different people are being charged for the same crime, but serving more time. And so we have these systematic issues that because of race, because we have this ideology that, if you're a person of color, then you have to be a criminal, so we got to put you away, these slogans and sayings that people, and a lot of our politicians are saying, about, different groups of people. And the framing and our intent in changing or having that conversation, which I think is what's happening nowadays, is the important feedback, that we're having this dialogue, that we're talking to each other, that I'm not afraid to say, how did you do that hair that way? I don't really understand that because I'm not the same ethnicity as you, but I want to learn, and really facing it forward instead of, being the passenger in the back seat. So I think that was my time. I think I ran over a little bit, but.
Thanks, Owen.
It's a great
That was
topic.
really good. That's great conversations. And everyone knows we record these, so they're on a YouTube channel. So anyone else could hear it, or anyone want to share it, we can put the YouTube channel or send that out later. So it's really a good device. But I know we're running a little bit scheduled, so I think Valerie and Melanie are gonna take over from now. And welcome them.
All right, well, so thank you, everyone. As you know, I'm Valerie, and this is my, third or fourth time being here, so thank you again. And I've invited a guest with me today. So the topic that we're about to go into is why all lives matter is part of the problem. And this can be a hard and personal topic for some of us. So first, as a white person, I know racism is bad, right? It's bad. And so I used to say to myself, well, I'm not a bad person, so I can't be a racist. So I will tell you, I was colorblind, and I've invited my friend Melanie, who has been the person to navigate me beyond that so that I'm able to see and understand. So the things that I shared today with you, or shared with you over the last course, she has been that person I've spoken of that has helped me navigate to being able to see things and understand things and investigate further, which has given me the opportunity to talk to you today. So what I'd like to do is make certain that when we talk about this particular topic, that we're focusing on the problem and not ourselves. And that's one thing that Lauren brought up, is have the capacity to look beyond and see the person in front of you, or see the situation, and not attach yourself personally to it. All right. So I'm going to let Melanie take on this one.
Okay, so we started with a question, which is, when you hear the phrase all lives matter, how do you feel and how do you react? And on top of that, I'd like to just kind of color it a little bit with, I'm not sure how many people are really familiar with the Black Lives Matter movement and how it makes you feel, or what your initial thoughts are when you hear Black Lives Matter. And is your natural response, of course, every life matter? Anybody want to share their thoughts on that?
I would like to actually say something about that.
Okay.
Am I on?
Yeah. I can hear you, Patricia.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. I was talking to Walter today about that. And I'm thinking, if all lives always mattered, we wouldn't be talking about Black lives needing to matter. So it's like which came first, the chicken? All lives should matter. And they don't, obviously, to us as a United States. So therefore, it propels us into having to push for Black Lives Mattering, because their Black lives are being criminalized and murdered and not dealt with fairly. And that attention has to be called to them. But again, it's like, if all lives really mattered, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Well said. Anybody else?
I'm sorry. My feeling is that, yeah, all lives matter, but obviously not equally. And I just felt like when the movement started with Black Lives Matter, I kept feeling, well, it's about time. I just remember back in 1968 going through this and being just so frustrated that we're doing this. We're having to do this again. Do you know what I'm saying? It shouldn't have to be that way. So, yeah, I cringe when people say all lives matter, because I just think they're missing it. They're just missing it. They don't get it.
So I like the way you said that, because they're missing it. I think there was a time where I would hear all lives matter and I would get so frustrated. And what I finally started to understand is there is a disconnect between the conversation of Black Lives Matter and potentially what people hear or perceive it to mean. And sometimes if we start at the foundation of the words, we feel so diametrically opposed that we feel like we can't get a conversation going. And so we have to look at other ways to state it. And so I was blessed to have Val and John actually here in Houston with me in the wake of George Floyd, and did not realize how impacted I had been. And so it was really nice just to have friends close to me and to be able to be vulnerable and be able to just discuss those feelings. And so we're watching bits and pieces of the news, and Val and I are having a dialogue, and I'm talking about Black Lives Matter, and there's some other things in the news. And Val, I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing this story. But Val says, I know, and that's why every life matters. And I said, let's unpack all lives matter. And I said, I'm going to take you out of the Black Lives Matter scenario. And I want us to think about being in the dry region of California in the middle of wildfire season. And we know that there is a flame coming. Like, we know that fire is moving in, and we have the fire department and we have our firefighters and wildlife, and they come into a neighborhood, and we know that the fire is heading there. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to beat back the bush and wet down your houses, and you're trying to defend them from the fire. I don't think I have control of the slides, right? Val, do you have them? And one house has a flame and the others don't. Don't we want to save every house in that neighborhood? Aren't they all equally important to us? Absolutely. But where do we start? So when we're in a neighborhood, where do we start? And so we definitely want to save every house, but we got to start with the one on fire, right? And so when I say Black Lives Matter, what we're saying is every life can't matter if Black lives don't matter too, right? Two. It's not an either or. This isn't pie. We're not dividing it. But oftentimes when we respond to someone who says Black Lives Matter and we say all lives matter, in the wake of the scenario of a wildfire, what I hear or receive is, we know there's a fire, but let's wet down every house. And let's start with the ones that aren't on fire.
Oh.
And so, yeah, they're all important, but we've got to put some spotlight on that flame. And so I often use that as an example to open the dialogue, just to kind of change perspective a little bit. And for those who may not be familiar with the broader movement, I'm hoping that is is helpful. And for those who don't know how to open that conversation with friends or with associates, I'm hoping that may resonate as an opportunity to open those doors as well.
I'm sorry, I switched the slide on you quickly.
No. Go ahead. I know we were going to cover 2 quick metaphors.
Yeah, so let's talk about the next metaphor. So you are a mother of a child with cancer who's going through chemotherapy right now. And you're working with a hospital who doesn't have someone who's a pediatric cancer specialist in the hospital on site. And it takes extra money to bring them on site, and you want to give your care to the best you can for your child. So you have a fundraiser for it. So you're in there with other people who have children that are also going through chemo, and someone pops in and tells you that other cancers matter too. They all matter. At that moment, you've just diminished the feelings that she has regarding trying to save her son. And now you're saying that we have to save them all. And that means my son is going to get the least amount of opportunity because we now have to distribute funds across everybody, and we may be last because the sheer number of childhood cancer versus basically going out for breast cancer awareness starts to overshadow the other cancers out there. So these metaphors are just meant to say, in the end, we got to take in the real world perspective just to get what that really, really means from us. So when we think about what really is the problem, what we do know is to matter means there's importance, there's significance, relevance, and consequence. And this isn't a fight over who lives matter more, right? Regardless of our heart and our intentions, we need to have an outward mindset. Just as Lauren has said earlier, it's not about me. It's about you. It's the perspective that we carry that is outside of our personal problems, our personal feelings, and our personal circumstances. And so what does it mean to a Black person when all lives matter is said in response of Black Lives Matter? First of all, just letting you know, throughout history, and I'm reading from a specific quote here because it came from a book, and I'll tell you because it's free as a PDF, but throughout history, those running the system have made every attempt to portray Black leg struggles for freedom and equality as Black people, trying to get special rights by taking something away from white people. They have mobilized the economic anxiety, fear, and anger of white people and blamed people of color for declining wages, rising costs, and unraveling of public institutions, which is really the result of massive defunding. So when someone says all lives matter, it implies you're less than me, right? Because it's not our intention, but it's what gets implied, and that's how they perceive it. Molly, did you want to add?
I think that one is spot on.
Okay. And so the next one is basically the fight is to end institutionalized premature death in the Black community. Premature death is because of institutional racism in housing, healthcare, jobs, education, the criminal justice system, and so on. And the premature death in the acts of relentless and heartbreaking racist violence. And what I mean by premature death, this isn't death by old age or simply medical stuff. This is premature death, an unplanned and institutionalized thing that is happening in our community. And so when someone says all lives matter, it implies everybody dies, get over it.
And when you say that, Val, I think what I really hear is it denies the data. It denies the data that we have that say Blacks are more likely to die at the hands of violent officers than any other category or race. It denies the data we have that say we have a systemic problem that needs to be addressed.
So one of the other things we want to remember is it's so easy to ignore the past. We learned that the first time I talked about when someone says, you're tearing down our history. But we can't only look at it from this point or this current stance. There is significant history where the system has supported slavery, lynching, discrimination and violence against Black people from the beginning. From the beginning. This wasn't something that developed over time. It was there in the beginning and it has remained. So when someone says all lives matter, basically it's implying that the past is the past and it isn't relevant.
Yeah, it almost denies that because we're not in those times today, that the system has kind of dismantled itself, versus recognizing that we have a system that we need to right size and to take apart and to address the challenges within.
And then this other part is don't we want our children to grow up in a world where they're safe, where they're cared for, where they're loved, where they're provided for and protected? If the conversation stops, then change isn't going to happen. And so when all lives matter is said, it implies slavery and segregation is over. So racism is gone.
It closes the conversation, really. I think the one thing that has been a really good theme on this call today, and I'm so happy I was able to be a part of it, is just the importance of dialogue and communication and being in relationship with one another. And so I think it's important, be it Black Lives Matter or any other slogan or assertion or topic that does not feel comfortable or doesn't resonate, or maybe we don't understand, it's always more important to ask the question and have the dialogue than it is to shut it down. And so I think much like we're doing tonight, it's always important for us to be able to have those conversations and understand both sides, and then hopefully just gain better understanding of each other and figure out a better way to move forward.
And then finally, there's a reason why we protest. We protest because we want our opinions to be heard in an attempt to change public opinion or government policy. So when we say Black Lives Matter or all lives matter, it's basically implying I'm going to fight against you. I'm not going to support you. I'm going to fight against you. And that's really what the takeaway is we're not helping. We're not helping at all. We're fighting against each other. So have you encountered a conflict or encountered this where you're talking to someone who says, well, all lives matter, or have you been in that position before where you had that kind of experience?
I spoke to my daughter about it, and I actually said all lives matter, and then I spoke to Walter about it, and I have a clear understanding. My spiritual belief is that all lives matter, and I understand what has happened to Black lives, and it is not right. But I believe we also have a systematic problem that we're not against each other. There's a system that is in place that is really perpetuating this, and that's where the concentration needs to be. And the violence is a little bit troublesome. And that could be the media, but I've looked very deeply into it, and peaceful protests may not work, and I understand the anger. So I'm learning here, and I appreciate all that you beautiful people are saying. Thank you.
I feel like the times that I've heard people say all lives matter, most of the time I feel like it's not like they're trying to be hateful or anything, but it's almost like they're basically like, oh, I can't really be a part of that, so I have to include myself in something. Like, it's almost like a natural thing, I feel like, a lot of times, and it kind of voids the message of Black Lives Matter, where it's like, hey, how long is this going to keep happening, where we're living in a country where we feel like, and not even that we feel like, but we are second-class citizens, and we're treated, and our opportunities show that. And so it's like, yes, all lives matter, but saying it in response to Black Lives Matter, it's always, to me, it's been like, okay, this person just doesn't really want to understand what the true message of Black Lives Matter is. They want to take it for the overt, oh, this must be separating because it doesn't include everybody in its statement. But so, and it's hard to even have that conversation because it's hard to argue against, well, hey, all lives matter, unless you are really educated with all the different, laws and systematic injustices that have been taking place since we've gotten here. So,
yeah, I'd argue that all lives matter is a microaggression.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone else feels that way. I feel like it's a huge
I would agree with you.
I second that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to kind of chime in with is, as we had the conversation before, when people say that, I mean, and it would tie with the, the house on fire and the cancers. And because I've used that example for people, and then that for some strange reason hits on a light bulb, that, well, I wouldn't want to be in the hospital with cancer and a doctor walk by me to say, well, no, I got to go treat the person with breast cancer because, all lives matter. And that one is the one that matters more right now. And, just having those dialogues and conversations. But I was going to kind of say that, I've had to deal with this professionally from the standpoint of, again, being an African-American male, you have a pre-diagnosed assumption of what I am. And then obviously when I start talking to people and William kind of talked to this, they'll say, well, you don't talk like a Black person. And I have to stop them and I have to say, well, that's because I'm educated, but that doesn't mean I don't talk like my color. That just means like I talk the way that I was taught to talk. And in a lot of communities, when we talk about some of these issues, the reason why people talk the way that they do is because they have a lack of education. They, have had microaggressions against them where they don't like school. Like they don't want to come to school. And so we've created all these systematic issues and they don't feel like they matter. Like I can tell you, like I've ran into enough students that, you're just another teacher that is going to tell me this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, you can make whatever choice you want to. The reason why I'm talking to you is because I care. And this goes back to the dialogue and the relationships with people. And, we can change people's lives. And I've been able to see that. Like I've been able to see kids who are the first graduating person out of their house. And I live in Olathe, and I would say it's more common if you were to go to Detroit or, an inner city, but it happens everywhere in our country. And until you have those conversations, until you have that dialogue, until you give that hope of that their life does matter, it's hard to get people to do anything you want them to do.
If I may, I appreciated the firefighters graphic and what I experienced, as a pastor, there's people of all walks of life, all levels of curiosity. And I tend to find that people who blurt out all lives matter are either people who have been afraid to be more curious about what the Black Lives Matter movement is really about, and so they find this an easy way to, as you wrote, shut down conversation. But as I picture that PowerPoint image, I think it's a little bit of indignation, not righteous indignation, but kind of selfish indignation. Like, wait, I've had a firefighter water in my house ever since I was a kid, and you're telling me that I've got to share some of the water with this burning house. And something bad could happen to my house if we let this house get taken care of. And there's this fear of, I don't know what I'll lose, but I'll probably lose something. And that has hardened hearts and make them look for the quickest way to shut a conversation down and shut a movement down if they had the power. And that's kind of the diabolical genius of that All Lives Matter slogan.
Yeah, I think before I made that, the first thing was, for some reason, because people want to stand up to have equal rights, they are getting special stuff. And in some people's eyes, becoming equal is special. right? They get extra stuff because they're becoming equal, and it's going to take away the things that they've had, or the luxuries they've had, the rights that they had, or the privileges that they've had, and the fear of loss of that.
As Christians, don't
It's like the saying.
I was going to say, as Christians, don't you think that we kind of deny the abundance of God in some of these statements of all lives matter? Like, it's kind of this theory of a closed economy. So if something that I'm losing, right? Like, it's a little bit to that fire analogy. You know, as people of God, shouldn't we believe in the abundance of God? To say, if you as Black lives get something, that's not necessarily taking something away from me as a white person, right? And so it's this kind of view of a closed economy, and I see that bleeding into not just Black Lives Matter, but also stances on immigration. If immigrants come, they're taking my jobs, they're taking these things from us, as opposed to adding to our economy and adding to our growth. It's a different view. And so I just, want to look at our world with the abundance of God, saying, if Black lives grow, all lives grow, right? Like the God's abundance grows, as opposed to, well, I've got to give up a bunch of stuff so Black lives can matter. And I think that's just where we are at as a society.
That's a great point.
Yeah, being out here, I drive trucks. I'm out here with a lot of different races of people, and out here we use our CB radio for communication. Just like with Facebook and Twitter, some people take it to the extreme and misuse and abuse it. So you hear a lot of stuff out here on the CB radios, driving trucks. With all this stuff that's been going on, with George Floyd, and all the other, police, brutalities coming against the blacks, and I hear a lot of the drivers, some of the white guys, truckers, they blurt out, all lives matter, all lives matter. I don't have time for all that black stuff, during the times when they was the protesters out on the interstate in Minneapolis, and one of the truck drivers, tanker truck, ran up in there, and you can just hear the bigotry and the racism on the radio. I'd have ran over him. I wouldn't have stopped. I'd have ran over him. It shouldn't have been in the first place. Why they out there? You just got some people that just don't want to get it. They don't want to accept it, and that's just, some of the part of the world, that you're going to have those that don't want to confirm, it's just part of good and evil. You're going to have evil people in the world, but with the Black Lives Matter movement, it comes up a lot after the media has, put out there and showed the world the brutality and the misuse and abuse of a black person. A lot of times they be unarmed, and they get killed by either a black officer, a white officer, or somebody from a different race, and that's where you see the Black Lives movement come on, because they want to show the world, hey, black people matter just like everybody else matter. So why is it that we get taken out, we get killed, and nothing happens to the person that did it, and so they just want the world to know, hey, we matter just as well as everybody else matters. So, I don't think it's, like you said, it's not that we're trying to take nothing from anybody else, just want to be created equal, like God, put on earth for us to do in the first place. I like the analogy of the cancer and the house fires, but the wildfires. But I don't know. This world, we're going to have to just live with people that just don't want to accept, and that goes on both sides. To hear what's going on with my fellow truck drivers, some of them, they just come out, and misuse and just say all kind of derogatory things, but I hear it all the time out here. So I don't, get in with them. I just, I hear it and I just go home, but that's what we deal with out here.
Thank you for sharing.
What you touched on there is a little of what Melanie said earlier. Being in the design and marketing world, I think I might hire her for some messaging down the road here. When she said Black Lives Matter, and then she added a 3-letter word, which I think kind of puts a lot of people, it would end the conversation in terms of, well, what about white lives? And the word she said was too. There's less education around Black Lives Matter too than there is around Black Lives Matter, okay? And so while saying Black Lives Matter engages people, whether it's negative or positive, they're talking, right? No PR is bad PR. I like the way that Melanie said Black Lives Matter too. And for me, that's a tool I will use with people around me that say, well, yeah, well, all lives matter. I like the way she said that, and to me, it shuts a lot of the negative side off from those who say that all lives matter.
And that is the core message. We're all familiar with the parable of the sheep, right? And I just want to use it as an analogy. I'm not trying to replace what it meant, but it is a fantastic analogy that basically says that one is lost, right? The shepherd left the 99 to go seek the one. And when they brought the one back into protection, heaven rejoiced, right? The key is we're all meant to be there together. But when there's one that is in danger, we will leave the 99 for the one. And it has nothing to do with whether or not the 99 matter, because they do, because they're in the flock already, right? They're already there and they're protected and they're safe and they're going to heaven. But the one matters because they all matter, just like the parable son, the prodigal son, where when he came back, it mattered, right? They all matter. So, but most importantly, right now, the people that are hurting matter most and matter right now. And because we can do something about it. Squeaky wheel, something's broken, we fix it, anything that needs to be a part of that. But the key is, and as you said, and I should probably put your quote up here, Melanie, is Black Lives Matter too. They just do. So just to end this, because I always like to come back with a positive note on any of this, because this is a hard topic. I want to end on a positive note of hope, right? Black Lives Matter isn't only a movement of anger, in which is interpretation by a lot of white America that takes from that quote, it's a movement of hope that basically cries out and says, hey, see us and see what we're going through. We're speaking up because we have hope that things will change, that we have hope that we'll be helped. We have hope that we are going to be able to live freely, that we are going to live safely, and that we will be equal. It's about hope. And remember last time I said, when we were talking about the 13th, the difference between Black Lives Matter now versus any other improvements or movement is this is leaderless. It is a movement by the masses, and it's not just Black people. It's all over the world. So there's really hope that can come from this. And we need to not be non-racist. We need to be anti-racist. And that's another key, is something that was said previously, is when we see something, we say something, we step in, we ally. So we can condemn it with our words, but we show it with our actions. And that's what's important. So when someone says all lives matter, and there is a glimmer of possibility to help them, to change their mind, or to educate them, I encourage us all to do so. And just as Fred said, there are those that are just going to be opposed to it. And those are the ones we have to pray that God is going to find their heart and they get to heaven somehow. So we all want everybody to go to heaven. So let's not pray for them to see Black lives. Let's get them into heaven at least and find a way that their souls can be saved.
And we don't want them to be total jerks on earth as well. So
come in and rearrange your furniture and you'll come back with a much different opinion. Any questions or any other final comments on this? And other than thank you guys for just listening to us.
Thanks, Val, for inviting me to join this dialogue. I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you all for having me.
Melanie, we hope you'll come back.
I will.
In 2 weeks. So this meets first and third Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central. In 2 weeks, it's a fifth Thursday, but we'll be streaming and then talking about the movie 13 or 13th. And we'd love to have everybody back. And we don't have a topic for sure picked for the 1st of or the 6th of August. If you have ideas, Walter is the content guy, or Copper, you can send it to me or Chris too. But
yeah.
So we'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Also, I want to tell everybody there's a free ebook online. It's called Towards the Other America. Right? It's anti-racist resources for white people. I encourage everybody to read it, but it's a pretty blunt way of being able just to handle and start thinking through anti-racism from a perspective. And it's not long, and it's available to you, and it's very educational. A lot of the content that I brought in today is from that reading, and it's very well done. Back to it, it's more than just not being racist, it's being anti-racist, and what can we do about that? So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
And Dan, I'd like to thank everyone. We had some great speakers and some great dialogue tonight, and looking forward to listening to it again. But this was great with the amount of people that were on, and the like I said, I'm always trying to change the world with other people, little by little, and change minds. I think we did a real good job tonight. So I appreciate everyone's time and energy, and hopefully we'll see you on the next meeting, and hopefully when we can watch a movie together.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And if others of you would like to be leaders for the evening, like Lauren or Valerie or Melanie was, yeah, talk to me or Walter. There's a whole lot more that we have to learn, and hopefully a lot of victories we want to celebrate together as the months go by. So, hey, I would wonder, Valerie, since you're the one who dropped the scripture on us, would you want to close us with a prayer?
Oh, most definitely. Oh, Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the blessings that we have, and specifically with the fellowship that we have on this call. We have this hope that we share our thoughts, our feelings, and that we take them in, and that you provide us the ability to really hear what needs to be said, that we're hearing the words that come from you, and that when we speak, they come from you as well. Father, we hope that this movement that we're taking on together starts to expand and grow and bring others in. And Father, thank you so much for the hearts that we have, the opportunities to share, and your grace and your mercy, so that we can always continue to be closer and more fully devoted to being followers of Christ. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 Well,